Good afternoon, and welcome to our first virtual all-team meeting. We appreciate you joining us remotely today. We know this is a bit different than our typical gatherings, and as with all virtual meetings, there's an opportunity for technical difficulties. We will work through that the best we can. Today, you'll be hearing from our executive team. Chuck, Miriam, and George are seated behind me at a safe 6 feet social distance, and Roy and Chris will be joining us remotely. Our presentation today will start with safety, followed by people, operations, commercial, and finance. We'll hear comments from George and close with a Q&A with questions that you all submitted throughout the week. Okay, let's get started.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start us off with safety today. If we could progress to the next slide, I typically like to show our safety pyramid. And this time around, as you can see, we have one under fatality, and that just gives me an uneasy stomach thinking about that. You never want to have a fatality on your site. It's the worst news that anybody can get, and I still remember the Thursday afternoon when I got the news we had somebody seriously hurt. So let's jump to the next slide. I want to talk more about that, and then we'll go back and talk about safety in general. So the OSHA investigation is still ongoing with Amons and Blackman, the contractor where the deceased worked. But I just wanted to give everybody a high-level overview of what we understand was behind the accident. You can see two photos on the screen. The photo on the right is the grader on the lowboy trailer as it pulled into our site. This accident occurred at the end of the parking lot next to the road to AIDT, and this film shots were actually taken from over by the guard shack. So they came in, two employees came in, they took the binding chains off the grader. That's all happening in the left-hand photo. On the right-hand side, as one employee climbed up to put the chains away, and let me say the arrow in the left photo points to a stowage area where you keep the chains that bind the machine down. The deceased climbed up, was putting the chains away while the lowboy lowered, and that's the photo you see on the right. As it lowered, unfortunately after the fact, as the team figured out, the Amons Blackman team figured out, the brakes were not set on the machine, nor was the blade set down. So the blade or the grader backed up and killed the deceased right in that position where the arrow's at. Such an unfortunate accident, and it did happen. As I mentioned, OSHA investigation is still ongoing. Amons and Blackman has been forward with us on all the information they have. We banned them from site as is protocol. After we saw the right things in place, the corrective actions, they've since been allowed to come back on site. But an unfortunate accident that didn't need to happen. So we can go back to the overall safety slide. Not a good start to the year. I have a lot of good things to talk about today, and this isn't one of them. I'm not happy with the safety performance. You can see right underneath the fatality, we had a lost time incident. This occurred with one of our own employees. It was a central maintenance employee troubleshooting a drive that was up on a crane. While he was had the cabinet doors open on the drive, looking at the display and the control, he noticed there was a cover that was loose. And he went to pick the cover up. The cover slipped and shorted between 600 volt DC, which caused an arc flash. Fairly serious injury. Anytime you have a hand injury, the doctors are very conscientious about letting you use your hand, because if it heals in the wrong way, you'll lose some of that agility of the hand. So it was a lost time. This one didn't need to happen. We have procedures in place. You know, if you're going to work in a cabinet, you kill the power. If you can't kill the power and you're going to work in cabinet, we have proper PPE, face mask and gloves to wear. So neither of those were taken into case this time around and resulted in a lost time. A restricted work day was a contractor. This was the first one of the year for a serious accident we had back in January, and it was a Songer contractor working on line 2, doing some piping work, manipulating a big pipe. It rolled on him and he fractured his thumb. He couldn't come back to work because that's the kind of work he does with his hands, so it was considered a restricted work. Medical treatment, I'm not going to go through all the details. Suffice to say that most of these that have occurred on site didn't need to happen. It's not because we don't have a procedure. It's not because we don't have the right engineering controls in place. It's because we're losing focus. We're in a crazy time with COVID-19, but we can't let that be an excuse. When we're on the job, we have to focus on what we do. Key safety initiatives, because we've had such a bad quarter, Tony has been tasked with putting together a committee. HR's on the committee and varying people throughout the plant are on this committee. They've already met several times to take a look specifically at what we can do to get better safety engagement, safety focus in our workforce. On the other key safety initiatives, you've heard me say them before, they're ongoing. A little bit of pause when COVID-19 started, but we'll be back on with 45,001, the FPA level 4 we're moving forward on, and permits, electronic work permits are progressing as we speak in trials. I wanted to talk a little bit more, and let's go to the next slide on the COVID playbook. So this is something that the team has put a lot of effort into over the last, I'd say, 3 weeks. It's been a focus of ours, and it's trying to assemble everything we know, all the good practices, guidelines, work rules that we have here in one place. So this was sent out Friday, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please review it. It's once again, it's a pretty good document, covers, I think, just about everything. I imagine as times change, we might make additions to the playbook, but for now, spend the 10 minutes it takes to read through it, and it's going to talk about all our best practices. I do want to mention, and I know an email came out earlier, we had our first positive case on site. We found out as a management team this morning, and Tom Nolan was notified yesterday. This is a case where the individual had been exposed knowingly, had quarantined himself. It was a family member he was exposed to. All the right things were done in this case. It's getting close. Phoenix has had 3. That's the contractor that you see on the screen, and OTK as well has had 3 cases. So I mean, that's why the playbook was put into place, because the last thing we want is somebody to come to work and unknowingly transmit it to a pulpit full of people. The market has us slow enough. We don't need to shut ourselves down due to lack of social isolation and bring COVID into our facility. And that's for me. I think Miriam's next.
Okay, so my name is Miriam Aert. For those people who have not met, who joined AMNS this year, I'm the Chief People Officer, and I will give you an update on the programs that we are working on this year. If we go to the next slide, you will see an overview of what we presented in December as a focus on 2020. So the subject for 2020 is and has been announced as the accountability focus in the activities, the programs, and the trainings that we are setting up. We have a number of initiatives that we unfortunately have put on hold due to the COVID social guidelining or due to cost reductions. One is the podcast, another one are the wellness committees, and then we don't want to spend the money on artificial intelligence for recruiting, since we're not recruiting at the moment. When it comes to the orange one is the apprenticeship program that we're still continuing with, but we're playing around with the timing in order not to have extra people on site this year. And then all the other elements that are in green, we are still working on. You obviously have seen, heard, read, experienced about the new Ceridian program for the time registration, vacation, and self-service. That has definitely been a big project that has been rolled out this year. The other one is AIDT that you probably have seen, that is now managed by AMNS and not longer by AIDT anymore. We're working on a new high orientation program. We're looking at new recruitment channels when we start recruiting again. We have a leadership program that's ready for rolling out. But the 2 focuses I want to spend a minute on is the skills progression update and then the team scan. So in the next slide, we'll have some information about skills progression. And for those people who are new, skills progression is a program that focuses on developing skills, knowledge, and competencies. I know we have been talking about skills progression for some years now, but it never came to fruition. we decided we were going to add resources dedicated to the program, which is what we have done this year. So we have Heat from L&D, we have Josabel, who are more or less working full-time on the program, and we have people from the mills and internal logistics who spend time supporting it and working out the fine lines for their mills. It's a massive program, so you won't see it rolled out in 2020. You will see the rollout in 2021, because it comes down to on-the-job training, it comes down to laying out the natural career path, it comes down to defining what testing needs to be done. So there is a lot that comes with it, and we're all working on that. But be assured that we are actually putting a lot of time and resources in that program for rolling out in 2021. Then the next slide is the team scan. As you know, as an organization, we continuously want to progress and want to improve on all different elements. One of the elements that we feel that we need to improve is on the effectiveness of the team development and on the development of our people, because we hear a lot of feedback from our people on that when it comes to surveys and questionnaires and all that. So what we decided to do is take a shot at where we are now, like a scan, where are we at this moment, and then develop trainings and coaching after we have had the diagnostic phase. So we have developed a questionnaire and we have asked the coordinator how he feels he's communicating, how he feels he holds people accountable, how he acts when it comes to the safety. And we have asked the same questions to the team members in that particular team. And as you can see, the difference between the green bars and the blue bars is where the discrepancy is. So the team members rate the coordinator less than the coordinator himself. And we don't want to show you this to say that we're going to take measurements or take corrective actions or anything like that, by no means. We want to help the coordinator in improving his communication, in teaching him and making him aware how he can act in a different way, for example, towards safety. We have two different views on that. Let's take the safety question. Both coordinator and team members rate that safety is the question or that they answer the most positive score in. And yet there is a difference between how well the coordinator reads himself and how well the team members rate the coordinator. And that relates to what Chuck says, that we need to take different actions. We need to change our view on the safety behavior that we have in our organization. So I mentioned this was for the coordinator, and yes, we started with the operations. We will roll that out in autumn with the other departments. And once we have done the diagnostic phase, as I said, we will set up a development plan for our coordinators. And then everybody will, by the end of the year, will have gone through the scan, and then we can start improving our culture and our team members and our team as a team scan for a better performance. That's my part. So next we'll go back to Chuck.
So as we start to talk about the operations, if we could jump to the next slide. I like to show this at our all team meetings because it's a nice way to give a snapshot of overall performance. Start contract to safety, much improved operation with respect to our business plan in Q1. You can see all the green on the chart. It's impressive, the amount of green. A few tough spots, you know, for example, the CRM yellow and then red. They've had some issues, but had a lot of external impact. We had, I think it was TG30 down for several weeks when it collided with the end stops. And we always, or I should say the PLTCM always suffers whenever ST3 or ST1 are down. In general, great performance. You see the lost time reflected there in March. The delivery strong, all quality strong. Quality's been very impressive last quarter. We can move to the next to talk about a couple of the very good things we've seen. Well, maybe all not records, just some great accomplishments. So strip mill, second best quarterly tonnage of all time. March production will not be a record. Record was very strong. It was the fourth best month of all time. Probably most impressive to me is the best 6 months working ratio, averaging close to 80. And if you remove September, where we had the spindle failure in the mill, they were close to 80 starting in June or July of last year. So a nice sustained improvement in working ratio. We have a long way to go. Our parents have some facilities that are at 90%. But it's good to see sustained. First you sustain and then you can improve upon that. And then the lowest cobble rate in the history of Calvert occurred in Q1. And we are the benchmark in ArcelorMittal for the finishing mill cobble rate. PLTCM, while they struggled from a working ratio standpoint, they performed great in terms of quality. Rejects rates were records in Q1 and in the quarter. And if, I've said before, that this is an efficiency type of thing. We want to make it right the first time. And a reject goes to scrap, and we got to remake it. So great job with the PLTCM. And then in the hot galv lines, line 1 performed stellar, set of multiple records. They didn't have their best quality quarter. That occurred in Q4 of last year, but it was the second best in Q1 of this year. A working ratio of 98.9%, best tons per hour performance in any given month, and a reprocessing rate that was a best month. So congratulations to everybody for setting records. Move on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the change. We live in a new world these days, and this is kind of give an overview of how COVID-19 has affected the operation. And I want to say we started with an operational schedule change, and that started on April 12th. I want to thank everybody for enabling us to change. We gave a relatively short notice, just a couple weeks, but basically running the plant on the weekends for the most part. I think CPL's running weekdays, but all other lines are running on the weekends. And then we're doing maintenance ourselves on the weekdays, starting with Tuesday afternoon through Thursday. Now, this is an optimistic schedule. Unfortunately, our order book hasn't even supported this type of schedule, so we still have a lot of downtime with the teams here. But the change in schedule enabled us to bring on a lot of work and do it ourselves. And I wanted to share the contractor reduction. This is a little bit old. We spiked up a bit for the hot strip mill outage, and I expect we'll go back down now that the outage is over. But you can see kind of levels of where we had our R&M contractors, and these are on a daily basis, and this was every day for the past, I don't know how many years since I've been here. So when we put the schedule in place, we were able to reduce contractors down to just a few cleaning contractors that have an industrial machine that we need, and then the one-off occasion where we do need some specialty. So great work there that was able to match production with our order book and enable us to greatly reduce costs. And I just threw a few photos in. It's a team up front, I think was in one of our Friday communications that came out. It's people from logistics supporting the mill on reheat furnace 1 clean out. Logistics also supporting landscaping. We've cut ties with the landscapers, and we're trying to perform that all ourselves using our logistics guys. And then some pictures of the finishing mill stands and some of the work that our team's doing ourselves to improve the rolled-in form material. You might think they're just beautification, but what we're after here is reduction of rolled-in form material with our own crews. I do want to mention the operating schedule change. I will continue until the market allows us to go back. So this schedule is probably good for around 70% production. Above that, would need to go back to our 4 on, 4 off, 12-hour schedules. So we'll be on this schedule for a while longer. Next slide. Slide shows from each of the areas some of the key things that the team, and these are more current than they are Q1, have been focused and working on. So in the hot strip mill, I mentioned the support that they got from the internal logistics team, but we're now on the second furnace, and cleaning the furnace out is very difficult and dirty work. So I appreciate all the help we're getting. We're not using any contractors. This would have been 100% contractor jobs in the past, but our teams are doing it ourselves. I showed the picture of the roll-in form material improvement. We also put in roller side guides. This was the #1 defect in the hot strip mill, by the way, in Q1. And the team has really focused on it. So once we get ramped up in some coating products again, I'm optimistic we'll see the numbers way down. And then they've done a lot of work with training, especially on the operator front. And all areas have taken this time to focus on operations training or operation procedure reviews, which is a great thing. We want to come out of this period stronger than what we were going into it. Cold rolling mill had the elimination of contractors like everybody else, so their teams rebuilt their entry walking beam and continued to do operator improvement through procedure reviews. Hot tip galv, we lost what we call the pre-melt pot on line 4. We lost that before COVID started, and it would probably cost us close to $500,000 to have contractors rebuild this pot. It's where we put the aluminum ingot in, pre-melt it, and then have they call it a launder, but it's a little tube that then feeds it into the main pot on the line. So our teams completely took apart the pot, demolished all the refractory, took out the coil. Coil's bad, and we don't have the ability to fix it, and we'll send it off. But just a great example of doing work ourselves. 8 new training modules. So again, big focus on training in all areas. And something I never thought of, I'd like to take credit for it, but I can't, using our ISLCs to cut coils that we sell for scrap into smaller pieces. And by doing that, we could raise the price per ton on the scrap we sell by $38. So great idea by somebody over at Hot Tip Galv Lines, and we're using it and increasing our income. Internal logistics, I think the big thing for them is they've been very flexible with the voluntary layoffs. They lost 20% of their workforce, and the balance of support in the other areas. Examples, the reheat furnace, some of the lawn things that we're doing. We're going through now with the COVID playbook, and we're adding some height to the cubicles in the social buildings. Hot strip mills should be done, and logistics is supporting us on all that stuff. Also flexibility across the board in logistics, internal and external. We've been able to modify our shipping patterns to where we can ship during the week instead of around the clock on weekends, minimizing the manpower we need and refocusing it on the weekends where the inventory support for the mills in ST1, slab yard, and ST3 to keep the mills running and operate the cranes. So great flexibility. So I'd like to commend everybody for the Q1 and then April and even in the May performance. Our things that we control in terms of our efficiencies and our effectiveness working ratios, MTBF, our quality numbers are all sustained at high levels, and that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me. Good afternoon. I'd like to give you a brief market update and what the impact is on Calvert. I hope we find everybody healthy, both physically and mentally during these challenging times. Next slide, please. So I'll go through a couple of macro indicators and what the COVID pandemic's done to us. So if you look at the chart in the upper left, it talks about gross domestic product for our country, and you can see the first quarter was almost 5% negative, and that's a result of our country shutting down in the second half of March and all the implications that had on the entire economy. You can see that the second quarter is going to be somewhere around 38%, at least that's the forecast, negative. And that would be a historical low and drop in GDP in a quarter like that. So you can see the significant impact that the stay-at-home orders and the state shutdowns have had on our overall economy in the United States and, quite frankly, globally. But there is expectation that in the third quarter and the rest of the year, we'll see things turn around. It'll rely on a few things. First of all, we have to make sure that as we return to work, we don't see any new spikes in COVID cases that would require us to shut down again. If it goes as projected, and you can see that by the end of the year, we've almost wiped out that very poor second quarter, and the expectation that the GDP would be down 5% overall. Significant, but at least a positive trend going forward if things hold true. Keep in mind that it's not just the USA that's going through this, it's the entire globe. If you look at numbers for the months of March and April, almost every country in the world has shown significant, anywhere from 25 to 40% GDP declines in those quarters. So this is certainly a global pandemic that has influenced everything we know about the economies. The lower left just gives you a brief update on unemployment. You can see that we had been going along at historic lows on unemployment. And with the pandemic, since the beginning of March or middle of March, we're near 15%, and that represents about 40 million new unemployment cases through the last month and a half to 2 months. So sharp increase in unemployment. And so again, as people come back to work and manufacturing companies and other businesses start up, hopefully that unemployment number starts to trend in the other direction. And then on the right side there is just kind of what the economic outlook is and who and what industries are expected to be the winners and losers. Unfortunately for us, if you look to the left side at the potential losers, you see automotive and construction, manufacturing, and oil and gas kind of neutral. But when you think about it, automotive and oil and gas are our primary markets at Calvert. It's a significant impact on us, and so we will be looking for ways to fill the gaps that the reductions in those industries have on us. Go to the next slide. So our key markets, automotive and energy, if you look at the chart in the upper left there on vehicle production, we've been going around 17 million vehicles a year for the last 4 years. And you can see that we were projected to be around 16 and a half in 2020. So fairly flat, but at least not a big decline. And then with the COVID-19 issues, you can see now that the April forecast is going to be 12.2 million vehicles, and it's upticked a little bit since the graph was put out. Right now, the expectation is that production will be somewhere around 13.4 million. So there's some brighter outlook than what was originally forecast back in April. See that we don't really get back to our 2019 and what was originally the 2020 forecast for the next several years. That'll be a slow rebuild out of all before we get back to normal in a steady place in the automotive industry. And then the right upper chart there just kind of shows by our OEMs the impact of COVID in 2020 and what they're seeing as the outlook going in 2021. So everybody is optimistic that once the economy comes back, we'll see growth back in the automotive market, but it won't be at the levels we had pre-COVID. And then our other key market is pipe and tube. And if you look at the bottom chart on the left, it's the US rig count. It gives you an influence of the drillings that are taking place. And you can see how significantly the rig count has decreased over the last 2 months. Under 300 total when you're normally in the 600 to 900 range over the last couple of years. And as we know, the energy market's been very strong and very good for Calvert, but unprecedented drop as you see that. And then on the right side, the oil pricing, all right? So at the beginning of the year when the COVID started hitting, Saudi Arabia and Russia got into an oil price war, and you can see how quickly in the bottom orange line there, prices dropped. And in fact, there was so much surplus of oil that it was sitting in tankers out in the ocean looking for places to be unloaded. And at one point, oil price was actually negative, which was the first time in history. So a lot of flux in the oil industry. It is positive again. It's around $30 to $35 a barrel today, but really we need it up in the 50 to 60 to really show any signs of growth. So our two key markets have been significantly hurt during this pandemic. Next slide. So what does that mean for us? So auto and pipe and tube represent 72% of our business in the 2020 business plan of our flat carbon business. Auto is expected to be down by the end of the year about 28 to 30%. And that is after a really catastrophic second quarter where we're down more like 60% in the automotive. Keep in mind that our automotive customers have not run for the past 2 months. And we continue to produce for these customers as we material line through and fill up warehouses. So now we sit on a significant inventory, commercial inventory bank that as the automotive companies come back up, they have to deplete before we can start to get production in line with our inventory targets. So as Chuck mentioned, we'll be at reduced schedules for probably the next month or so until we start seeing the demand come back from the automotive companies. The good news is that by last week, almost all of them have started back up. They're doing a phased in approach, starting with 1 shift per day and working their way up to fuller production as they see the next few weeks come about. The big issue is whether or not, again, social distancing has been put in place. They all had to put their own playbooks in, and they're demanding that of their suppliers. And so Chuck talked about ours. Also, they have to make sure that they have the complete part supply chain in place. And it's not just steel, it's all components. We know that Honda right now is having issues with some of their smaller wiring components, and it has their facilities actually shut down until they can get that supply chain back in place. So it'll be a tough go for us in automotive as we ramp up. We expect to be off the 2020 business plan. MRF3 was very close to that by over 400,000 tons. So you can see a significant impact to our business in auto. And the other big market is pipe and tube. It's down 40% for the year, almost 440,000 tons. As I mentioned, the oil wars, and what that caused is that caused many of our customers to cancel some of the big projects they had in place for this year and that we were in line to receive. Some bright news there. Last week, we received an order from Wellspun, one of our pipe and tube customers, for 90,000 tons, and that'll be coming to us in the next couple of weeks for production beginning in July. Berg received the other half of this order from the Trans-Canada pipeline, and we're in line to get that as well. So that could offset some of this down market that we're seeing by about 150,000 tons if we get awarded both projects. So that's good news. Seeing some other signs of life, but in smaller amounts. Big projects, not a lot this year. We don't expect that until 2020. CRU pricing has gone down. You can see the bottom line there for hot roll on the bottom left chart to the lowest price level we've seen in the last 4 years. So it bottomed out at about $436. The last time we'd seen numbers like that was in 2016. It has gone up since then, and the reason for that is the U.S. steelmaking industry as a whole is operating at about a 60% level, 55 to 60%. That means companies have taken a lot of capacity out. They've shut a lot of blast furnaces down. Many mills have shut down and taken time out. ArcelorMittal is only running on half of the blast furnaces in the USA. So they only have 3 operating blast furnaces. So we've reduced capacity by 50%. And so what's happening is as we take steel making capacity out, demand, if it changes at all, it goes up, and that causes to go up a bit because nobody wants to bring an asset back up yet. So that's good news for us that the prices have started to go back up. We just got to stay disciplined as an industry and make sure that we don't bring a whole lot of capacity back online until we see the demand there for it. So we have some limited operations we're running through right now. We're not alone. We do see some opportunity in the automotive where we're going to gain some business on part transfers from some of our sister facilities that will stay idled a little longer. Iron Tech and Iron Coat, I know one of the questions is about how they're running. They're our sister JV with Nippon Steel, and their coating line has actually been down since the beginning of May and will not run until the middle of June. They're a 100% supplier virtually to the automotive industry, so they feel the same pain that we do when the automakers go down. The cold line, the continuous anneal line, Iron Tech, they took a couple weeks out, but they're now back up and running as they've got a better portfolio in the cold roll market that allows them to get running again. Another sister facility, Columbus Coatings, they've been idle also since the beginning of May, and that's where we're going to be seeing some of the part awards come to us. So there is some bright outlook, but it's going to be it's a slow climb back out towards the end of this year. And that's it on the commercial side.
Good afternoon, all. Hope you can hear me well. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so we have spoken about this before. Manufacturing company profitability depends on mainly 2 factors. One is the spread between raw material and finished good pricing. And the second factor is the cost of converting that raw material to finished goods. And this chart is about that first factor, spread. We buy most of our slabs at this Brazil index, and the spread is measured for the Brazil slab price against the North American hot roll price. Most of all our revenue is based on this hot roll price. So you can see that 2019 was a year of low spreads, historically speaking, and 2020 continues to be at that low spread level. Spreads definitely will improve from these levels, but by how much and how fast will depend upon the two things that Chris mentioned about how fast the demand will recover and how will the steel makers react by bringing the assets back up. So if we have too much supply coming back up fast, then the recovery will be slower in the spreads. Can we move to the next slide? This is about the second factor I mentioned, the cost of converting the raw material to finished goods. We all know that in the steel business, the costs are optimized when we run our assets at our plant level or close to full levels. So even the so-called variable cost, let's say for example natural gas per metric ton cost, when we are running an assets in a stop and start mode, those gas consumption per ton also tends to increase. So this low utilization that we are seeing now is impacting our conversion costs. Can we go to the next slide? This slide shows us the impact of how fast the COVID crisis impacted us in our inventories. So we continue to produce while the automakers started by saying that they will be down for 2 days, then they extended it to 2 weeks, and then it ended up becoming more like 2 months. So with the uncertainty that we had, we kept operating for some time, and then we have reduced production starting from the first week of April. So we have a significant amount of commercial inventory that we have in hand right now, which we will be working through to reduce in the next few months. So our operations will be starting slower than what you would see our customers would start up, because we do have the inventory that our customers can use for a few weeks before we need to start our assets up. The other point I want to mention about here is the slab inventory levels. Currently, we are about 1.25 million tons of slabs. So that's a lot of slabs that we have. That is also impacted by the demand coming down faster than we could reduce our slab purchases. Our slab purchases comes with a long lead time, so the demand drop was much faster than we all thought. If you could go to the next slide. So what can we do in this time is, thanks to all your effort, we have undertaken a lot of efforts to reduce cost and conserve cash. All of you have raised the occasion by identifying actions and implementing them. So these are this lists some of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but would like to highlight just the two of them. Reduce the slab purchases. So we have reduced about 1.2 million tons of slab purchases, which gives us a benefit of about $600 million. And then if you see the next line, you will see reduce the printers and printing. So that is, at the best, maybe a few thousands of dollars savings in the year. So what I wanted to highlight was every action is important. Every penny, saving every penny is important in this crisis time. So thank you for bringing up all the ideas, whether they were big or small. Thanks for all that. And this is to what we need to do is we need to flex our cost with volume. So as the volume goes down, we should be able to reduce our costs so that we can be a sustainable company. I know some of these actions are short term. These are only applicable during the crisis time. But I think what we cannot forget about what are the things that we need to do for long term. the long-term we need to do actions that would also improve the long-term sustainability of our company. So greatly appreciate all your efforts during these tough times to reduce costs and conserve cash. So now George will make some final remarks.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to mention that we have 371 people connected in this call, which is very good. Secondly, I want to thank you all for all the effort everybody's doing in this company to overcome these difficult times. I'm very proud about that, and not only myself. It's the same word from our boss, Brad, and the owner of the company and the son of the owner. So they all say that we are managing correctly, and we are doing that because we have you helping us on that. So some remarks for the presentation up to now. I guess health and safety call us attention. Health due to the COVID, and we are doing very well, but we have to take more care than we have, and that's the reason we launched the playbook in order to be a guideline for us to follow that guideline and to be safe, to keep social distance, use the mask when we are not possible to get 6 feet, as we have the mask here. We're not using now because we are all 6 feet. But if you move here, no 6 feet is available, it's possible, we should use the mask. We have, as Chuck said, one case that happened yesterday, exposed the external of the company, plus 3 cases in our Phoenix contractor. Statistic-wise, is quite good to show that everybody is really understanding the importance to control itself. And the other remark is about safety. We also emphasize how drastic it was in the middle of this turmoil to have a fatality. So one person that could not come back to his family to meet them. We don't know the full root cause because it's still under investigation, but certainly an injury can be avoided. So we should learn with that and change as much as we can our behavior for safety. Behavior makes difference. If you don't know what to do, it's better to say don't do, or try to do things to be fast, because fast means unsafe possibility behavior. And we are here to protect people first. So our main value is people. So people has to protect it himself, and we should protect the others. So this important remark, our behavior makes big difference. So also remark, Chris mentioned, and also Roy, and also Chuck, the impact that this pandemic is causing to our business. So if you see the Q2, we have lines in Q2 that they are working around the 30% capacity only. So in average, you are a bit over 50% of our capacity. So it means how difficult is this time for us, and only with your help, with your support, we can manage this kind of crisis and do the best we can to protect our cost, save cost, and save cash. Who does not have cash will die. So we have to protect our cash in order to survive in these difficult times. So I should not forget, General Motors awarded us for the 3rd time in a row for the Excellence Award. This is a very good news. And as I said, on the 2nd time occurred, it's a demonstration that integrated together we can be better and we'll be stronger. We were recognized again. Now we'll fight for the 4th time in a row. So this is due to you. Your support in the way we see Calvert. We are here to do our best M&S Calvert possible. And just to emphasize that the team scan, Mira said that, is to improve, to help us and develop people. And the skill progression is one demand that everybody is looking for. And finally, to come. We have a very good workforce work on that with the help of all the areas. And we have a very, very good skill progression plan to allow people to progress based on the skill everybody can really have skill to progress in this company. So that's my remark for this meeting, and thank you all for the presence in this meeting. And now we go to Q&A.
Our first question is for George. Will we pick up Calvert Plus transformation, and if yes, how?
The answer is yes. And as we said, before this pandemic, we did not stop completely the program, but to have to slow it down a lot to concentrate everybody in the crisis management. And even the change agents, they came back to their areas to support it in this crisis management. And the way we will go back and start again, most probably in June, that's our new schedule. We do by ourselves. As I said before, we will not count on any consulting company. The consulting company will be ourselves, our group, even Nippon Steel with their capability. So we will count on support from AM companies like Dofasco and maybe also Tubarão, that we started doing by ourselves. We prove ourselves that we can do that, and we can bring this coverage even better. So important to improve the way we work, improve our process, take waste out, and be better, be lean, and be much more sustainable in the future.
There were multiple questions concerning the wearing of masks. Chuck, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I think, we all know that masks aren't preventative. They help spread the virus, but they do not prevent the virus. So in the playbook, we relaxed our rules. At first, we had said if you're at your workstation, you could not have a mask, but anywhere else, you need to wear a mask. The playbook relaxes that allows you to be in transit, or when you're working by yourself, you don't need a mask. But masks are important as a deterrent. And we have the 6-foot rule, and that is the social distancing rule. That's, in my opinion, why some areas do better than others. I'm talking about, globally, social distancing. So where we can social distance, a mask is not a shortcut to social distancing.
This one's for Miriam. Will the furlough be extended and/or more team members put on furlough?
Well, we have decided that we will need to extend the furlough until at least the 31st of July. This is to respond to the business needs, as we have heard in this past hour. We will do a new round of voluntary furlough, basically the same process as we did with the first one. We'll see how many people respond to that for starting July 1st or at the end of June, depending on the Monday. And depending on how many people we have had depending on how many people we have who volunteer, we will then see how many people will be on the mandatory furlough, and if we're going to make changes to those who are currently on the mandatory furlough system.
Just to emphasize, we will call the volunteer furlough team members, and we invite them again for a new volunteer furlough. So the volunteer furlough will end in June, and we call a new one. Not necessarily the same people, as will be volunteer, will be for everybody. And for mandatory one, we will be again for salaried workforce, because in the hourly team, we change the shift, and the people is doing their effort in the shift change we implement in the plant since late March, beginning of April, with the real change with some measures previous to that.
George, it looks like we will face low demands for a while. Do we have a target in terms of minimum production volume or minimum EBITDA to say that our company is sustainable and can keep running, keep people employed, and also call back the employees on furlough? What is that target?
I guess, first of all, I would like to remind again the numbers in Q2. As I said, we are working Q2 over 50% less production than our capacity. In some lines with 60, 70%. What drives us, a key message to our team member that we are doing the best we can, at least we're trying to do our best not to protect our own employees' job. So if you take the huge impact in Q2, our furlough should be even higher, much higher. So there's a clear message that we're protecting people. And we are working this company, of course, to support the market we still have. As Chris mentioned, that we lost a huge in automotive, is 45% of our order book. And in pipe and tube is 30+% of that. So in the end of the game, pipe and tube will be higher in the average of the year, because we hope from the startup that the automotive they had last week, they will continue to ramp up. No risk will come back. That's the risk for a new wave of pandemic and so on, so ever. So I count on them in their performance to start ordering still from us. The inventory is high in the supply chain, so they should reduce the inventory first. And we are looking to have at least contribution margin to generate cash to keep this plant operating. We need this plant to operate in order to sustain our jobs, our families. So the guideline, as much we have business with positive contribution margin, we'll take them. Not necessarily EBITDA margin, because if you look only for EBITDA, maybe should be even more reduced. So generate cash is one thing. To generate cash, you have to have positive contribution margin. Out of that, cost control is important to us. So once again, I call you again for cost control. As much as we can do, postpone and cut that in a sustainable way.
Miriam, we are having the Learning Week during the furlough. Would it not be more efficient to have Learning Week so that all team members can participate?
So the date for the Learning Week is set by corporate, and corporate has, in line with the cost savings for the whole group, determined to cut a lot of initiatives, but Learning Week is one of the few that the group decided to keep, and as I said, the date is set. It will be a virtual Learning Week, and basically the advantage of that is that we will be able to record every training, every speaker that we have during that week. We obviously focused on having a very low cost Learning Week. We make a lot of content ourselves. And then our guest speaker, who was announced in the Calvert Heat, he is coming here, and he's doing it for free. So that's also a nice advantage. But our people who are out on furlough now will be able to address and attend all the trainings that we have during Learning Week afterwards.
George, when will employees working remotely be able to come back to the office?
When we mentioned, Chuck, myself, and maybe others mentioned about the playbook, what's happening in this pandemic, we're learning a lot. Making regular daily meeting internally, learning with benchmark, with ArcelorMittal experience, Nippon Steel experience, now to our customer experience, like automotive, that we have 45% of our order book. So one learning that we're getting out of this situation, social distance is really key. We are not in a rush to bring people back, because we are with a plan. We started last week in the hospital new social building, and we will go back to all social building, all pulpits, and put the physical barrier in a way that can sustain those social distance for a long time. That should be the new normal. Unless we have this ready, we are not bringing people back. If you take it, the earliest it will be, let's say, second half of June, but no hurry for that.
Chuck, after everything gets back to normal, can we have a vote to change the schedule from 4 on, 4 off to the DuPont schedule?
So the short answer to that is yes. By the way, I'm familiar with the DuPont schedule. The facility I worked at prior, for 20 years, we ran a version of the DuPont schedule. But it needs to be in line with our business goals. So when we're through with this schedule that we're on now, and things tend to get back to normal, there's still interest, form a committee, take a look at the schedule itself, and if it meets the needs of the company, we can move forward.
Miriam, when do you expect to resume the tuition reimbursement program?
We don't have a date set for that, but that will depend on when the business picks up.
Okay, for our last question, and this is for George, where are we with the union? Will there be a vote? And if yes, when will that be?
Yes, the first thing I would like to update you. You recall that the USW left a lawsuit against the company to have a representation for you employees without the secret ballot elections. But finally, the court in Indiana decided to bring the process to be evaluated in Alabama court, and it's a victory for you guys, and hopefully soon we'll have this update. Regarding the election, just to recall back on March 17th, the election was postponed. We received the official letter from NLRB due to the coronavirus possible impact at that moment. So it will not be safe to have an election that was supposed to be March 24th and March 25th. So we agreed with that, especially because we were all learning about this pandemic. And at that moment, we did not have a proposal or a safe way to do in-person secret ballot election. So they sent us a notification with to respond about our view on both secret ballot in person or secret ballot by mail. We made a response for them saying that in person is much better, and we have a detailed plan how we can guarantee the safety procedures like social distancing, sanitization, and well done that we can do it in a safe way. So USW did the same, but the USW is in favor of mayor election. We will fight to demonstrate them that the in-person election is much better for everybody. So we are now waiting for this final decision to see the next step, but there is no new date established from NLRB. Hopefully it will be solved in the next couple of months. We don't know yet. And I would like to thank you for your patience. I know it's a long time in that journey, but hopefully it's come to an end. It was not exactly that we were hoping to be March, but it was not due to anybody, it was due to this big issue worldwide, the pandemic. That's the most update I have.
Okay, so that is all of our questions. We appreciate everyone that has joined us for our first virtual all-two session. Thank you.